I want to officially welcome you to The Future of Content is Composable, and we are talking empowering businesses to design composable experiences. Now, I have Jeff Lynn, who is our Acquia's Director Solution of Engineering, on the line. He's going to talk us through this topic for today. So, Jeff, I'm going to hand over to you to get started.
Hey, everyone. So really glad you can join us here this morning here in Singapore, as well as afternoon everywhere else, nighttime, the rest of the world. But today we're going to be focusing really on the concept of composability. And I think most of you either have an idea, or if you're curious about what composability means, we're definitely going to be touching upon that more from a marketing perspective, as well as talking about it from Acquia DXP play here. So my plan is in the next 30 minutes together, we're going to be focusing on really three big things, your takeaways for today, which is one, really helping understand the importance of innovative and personalized experiences and how composability can help you really achieve those one-on-one conversations or personalization campaigns that you're looking to drive for your end customers and or for your business. Two, I'm going to provide some consideration, and this is more so from kind of my own experiences. By no means is this the end all be all, but certainly I want to provide with you a couple of stories, a couple of experiences and recommendations, how you can take and make your business kind of work in the way that composability is supposed to work. And lastly, I do want to tie this all together by giving you a quick understanding of how we as Acquia have approached composability strictly from a DXP perspective. So more product, function, features, right? But certainly tie that back into the whole business point that we're trying to make for points 1 and 2. To get there, here's kind of the small little agenda I put together for us here today, rather intimate group, but nonetheless, quite a lot of information. So we're going to take a quick look at, well, how did we get here from a composability standpoint? And I would say that one of the biggest purveyors of composability is really Gartner and kind of how COVID has affected us from a worldwide perspective. Secondarily, we're going to look at the composability model and then followed by kind of needs of the modern marketing teams. All in all, right, I really hope that we can walk away with kind of good understanding of how can we apply some of the business processes and as well as architecture to kind of your own situation here in composability. To kick ourselves off, let's kind of talk about personalization, because I believe that with this whole kind of concept of Lego building or composability, it really comes back to, well, the whole business driver of all of this is that we want to go ahead and make our experiences with our end customers much more personalized. And to me, personalization can mean a lot of things. Generally, the context is that I want to present kind of relevant content to my end customers to obviously influence them for either purchase, upsell, cross-sell, or some kind of action that needs to take place. More interesting enough to me is that over 30% of US, or actually, I would say this applies to the rest of the world too, right? Most adults do want personal experiences. And this is coming from Forrester and based on their internal research. So whether it may be say, hey, an article that you read, what's the next recommended article or the subsequent topics that a person might be interested in? These are all considered personalized experiences. And ultimately, content becomes king when you want to get that last hurdle or bump into getting someone to convert or to perform some kind of action. And hence, that's why personalization is such a big driver in today's topic here. So when I think about composability, I think about kind of how we have evolved as businesses, right? And I kind of broke this up into a couple different segments: the first gen, second generation, and next generation. Now, when we think of what I call the first generation, right? The example here I'm giving you is more so in the realm of e-commerce, but this is applicable in pretty much of any kind of channels that you may be working with or verticals. So first, let's say from the standpoint of, say, e-commerce, right? A lot of times in the first iterations, they were treating the web experience as basically an additional sales channel, meaning that the larger investment being made in CRM, ERP products, right? Content management systems, pretty much a lot of those big on-premise systems, they were trying to figure out ways of tying that experience and tying those investments and utilizing a simple front end to kind of display all that information. And I'll show you what that looks like in the next couple of minutes. As we evolved and as more companies understood the importance of being e-commerce first or e-commerce centric, it then really said, okay, well, how can we really transpose a lot of the great monolithic systems and put that into more of the web experiences? So it really gave birth to, well, can I minimize a lot of the back-end interactions and put everything on the front end? And what that meant was that it became very heavy and very expensive to upkeep all the front-end services. For example, think of something as simple as web analytics, which we take for granted in the whole e-commerce / web space right now. At one point, that was a very heavy application as people try to figure out how can we optimize a JavaScript tag to ensure that we're not bogging down the performance of an e-commerce site and therefore not trying to lose any additional experiences and or money. But where we think this is all going, and this is coming from both Forrester and Gartner, is that it really comes down to the composable ecosystem. So what does that actually mean here? Well, one of the things that Gartner talked about in composability is really the fact that with last year, 2020, COVID hitting the rest of the world here, people and companies had to really switch on a dime from, let's say, hey, you were running business that was primarily offline. How can you switch your business model and or your systems, your tech systems, into serving more of an online model? And that's where composability becomes much more important. So therefore, we're thinking about ways of treating your technology and your business processes essentially like Lego blocks, where you can insert, remove, right, change and whatnot, pretty much on a whim while ensuring business continuity. So therefore, what we're saying here is that not one system has more precedence over others. They're all pretty much equal. Now, truth be told, this is easier said than done. But ultimately, what we want to drive to is really this kind of experience into more of a customer-centric experience. So taking what we just learned in the last slide here, the example I want to give you is, okay, the first generation was really ERP focused, meaning that we're taking all these old monolithic systems and slapping a front end to display all the various products, simple as that. In the second generation, where we're trying to go e-commerce first here, it's all about creating a much more robust experience to help move the needle, right? Or move the last mile for all your end consumers, ultimately helping them convert and purchase more products or services. And lastly, what we are getting to now is a composable ecosystem, trying to really wrap the whole offline, online experience together so that it is a customer who controls their own experiences, but at the same time, giving you the kind of information and data to help you personalize the experience on a much more intimate and one-to-one basis. And this will actually control and help you guys really affect the rest of your marketing campaigns and initiatives, whether it's on email, whether it's on the web, whether it's on mobile. It's all about data collection to allow you to do more robust targeting and or marketing. So just a quick snippet here, and this is what the analysts are saying when it comes to composability, is that a lot of the key challenges that trying to change from old implementation, old ways of doing things, as you all know, it can be very difficult. Hence, therefore, we have to take into consideration some new processes that may come in, as well as a big cultural change. Now, one thing is, some of the terms that you may have heard in the industry is the whole concept of headless. Well, headless is great, but to us, we do have a stance here, which is that we think that hybrid, or meaning the usage of not just purely a headless CMS, which is very API-centric, but the hybrid approach is giving the regular business users control utilizing a no-code, low-code initiatives, while still retaining a lot of controls that your developers and or web programmers really desire. So for us, we're going to be focused a little bit of time here today, talking about why we think hybrid is the new approach that many of our customers should be undertaking. And then lastly, I want to give you kind of a quick snippet in terms of, well, how can you bring some of these ideas to life by looking at different roles and responsibilities amongst the marketing and leadership team? To open this a little bit more, let's talk about the composable model to dive in one level deeper here. And I think to best understand that, let's kind of look at some of the terms that really define what composability actually means. So the first one I want to introduce you is coupling, which, as you see from the screen here, it's really around the level in interdependence and connections. So what does this mean in our context when we talk about, say, marketing systems? Well, think of something as simple as, say, tying in CRM with, say, an email platform, right? What does that actually look like? Well, you might take time, effort to say, hey, I want to connect my data to move that data from CRM over into my email so I can then run, say, retargeting and or remarketing campaigns. So I can influence people and actually develop a nurturing campaign for a long run or long-term engagement. Well, when you think about that, you're essentially coupling or tying together an interdependence, because in the email platform, if you don't have updated customer records from CRM, then it really doesn't become that useful. At the same time, if your CRM is not helping you recollect the metrics in terms of opens, clicks, reads, and whatnot coming in from email platform, then data becomes stale and not robust. So in this way, we think of these two platforms essentially coupling them and tying them together. How easy it is to remove one without affecting other, that's really hard to say. But in this example, there is a level of dependency that takes place as a result of how we designed this from the get-go. So when you think about it in context here, right? What does it actually mean? Well, in traditional monolithic, which is that graphic on the bottom right-hand corner, this kind of interdependency becomes very, very challenging and very cumbersome because when you remove one connection, invariably it could affect all the other interdependent systems that may have in place. The example I gave you was around CRM email. But what if I said, okay, well, let's tie in web analytics. Let's tie in a targeting platform. Let's tie in, say, advertising and whatnot. So when you actually remove one of the platforms, let's say your email platform, and change it out, it eventually actually affects everything else out there inside of your entire ecosystem. So what does that actually mean? Well, that means that there's additional cost, time, and money in order to ensure that you have business continuity. So therefore, that's why the topic of composability is so hot right now, is the fact that we want to think of our systems, essentially, that we invested in as basically not interdependent. That means that we could simply sever one connection and all the other business continuity pieces still run very, very independently. Wow, this is easy in theory. It could be much more challenging to get there. But we here at Acquia are here to help in kind of figuring that out. One thing we need to talk about is from a legacy architecture, what does this actually mean? And this actually ties in very nicely to why composability and interdependence was such a hot topic in response to all this. When we think of kind of legacy architecture, a lot of what we do these days, especially on the web or within mobile, well, it's controlled by developers, right? Which is fine because obviously they're very good at the job, and we want to ensure that we empower them with the right tools. But nonetheless, right, how easy it is in your organization to change content or change things within the confines of your website itself. It could be easy or it could be challenging. In my own experience, many of my customers find it very, very challenging to simply change as simple as, okay, how about a button or even color within confines of the website itself? Secondarily, business capabilities, which is that what process do you have in place? What are the hoops you have to jump towards in order to get something changed or really to affect kind of the one-on-one personalization that you'd be really looking at? And the last two thing is governance and scale. Well, because a process needs to be scalable in order to make them very efficient, it's not always the case. Hence, that's why legacy architecture may not be the best approach to kind of what most of my customers, or perhaps what you're trying to do and accomplish when you're trying to move things fast and break things quickly. We also think there's 3 composable choices for many of the customers I've worked with, primarily focusing on, say, the full stack, decoupled, as well as hybrid. Now, what does it actually mean? Well, full stack means that everything's centered around, say, marketing initiatives, meaning that we're taking a very low coding, very UI-centric business processing approach. So tools that we'll be looking at is, think of, say, a Wix approach, or perhaps a Shopify approach, where everything will be done on a UI that's very marketing driven. So in that, right, we're really empowering the marketing folks to bring their ideas to life, to really change things as they see fit. The next two, decoupled headless, I kind of tie those together because what that means is we're taking the approach of leveraging purely from an API perspective that really empowers the developers to do things that they might want to do. So for instance, we might have a technical front end like a React.js or a Node.js or anything, or Angular for that matter, that will then allow us to call different APIs to pull back data that sits within a CMS or any kind of internal systems that we have to create really robust experiences across various channels, such as a mobile app, digital signage, or even perhaps a display kiosk. Now, this is a very, very powerful approach. But having said that, it's definitely very dependent on in terms of technical details and technical capabilities that you may have on your team. And then lastly, there's also dependencies in terms of, well, how fast can you actually move things if you're relying on developers or ITs at every point in time. So where we think the opportunity really lies is taking a hybrid approach, meaning that we're marrying the best of both worlds from the full stack and the decoupled initiatives to create a hybrid approach that we're leveraging and essentially empowering the marketing folks to bring their ideas to life, but at the same time, still giving the API access that many of the developers as well as IT folks may crave. So that approach to us makes a lot more sense rather than having picked one over the other. Ultimately, it's the point here that we're doing is helping you bring those ideas to life in a much more quick and efficient manner. So let me kind of pull this into more of a user experience kind of topic here, which is that, essentially I have a kind of a mock-up of a typical kind of e-commerce experience. And there's various things that we should focus on, which is such as the left-hand side here, which is the shop by shopping options, which essentially is a taxonomy or a search, if you will. At the very top, we have different like call to actions. On the right-hand side, we have various kind of initiatives and so on and so forth. But honestly speaking, this site itself should not be treated as particularly one page. What that means is, if you look at this closely, each of these represent various types of components or capabilities that are interdependent upon one another. While they'll be interdependent, we need to start thinking of them as various different web components that could exist in itself or could be tied together based on certain actions. So think of something as simple as, say, the add to cart button. That could be treated as simple as a separate web component. Because why? Because we use it many different times, but the logic behind it should always be the same. So therefore, from a technical perspective, we should be able to carve that out and reuse it each and every time without having to change the underlying code in order to empower the marketing folks to do things much more effectively. The same thing at the very top, the whole call to action piece that says active personalization right now. Maybe that's a rotating banner that is personalized based upon who the user actually comes in based on their different data attributes or prior purchase behavior. To me, that really represents an opportunity to really upsell and cross-sell additional things, empower the user to really make the best decision possible. And then lastly, everything you see here should be able to be comprised and acted upon very quickly and very easily, really cutting down on any type of lag or technical debt that you may have in the backend. So knowing that, how can we bring this to life through Acquia? Well, like I talked about before, our approach here is to create a more hybrid approach by taking some of the whole robustness or the UI components that are targeted at marketers, while also giving the flexibility for the backend as well technical folks to do things that are much more complex. So we've taken a more componentized approach, which is our model is all about component assembly, which will actually give you faster time to market and higher ROI. So what that actually means is really comes down to 4 points, is that one, the business user controls the whole presentation layer, meaning the layouts, how things look like, the whole development aspect of it to really engage their end users to get them to take a certain action. Secondarily, packaging business capabilities, meaning that whatever business processes, meaning workflow, meaning capabilities, meaning say, hey, somebody coming in here and actually following through or somehow the product flow, that should be controlled by the business, and the platform itself or the technology itself should adhere to those things. Thirdly, giving the end user a very seamless experience, and then doing this very easily at scale. So meaning that when we want to launch a site or a new campaign, we shouldn't be waiting around 2-3 weeks. We're operating at how fast we try things. And I think that's important because when we think about in the world of, say, marketing or world of customers, to me, it's always about failing fast, because you want to have good ideas, but you don't get to those good ideas if you're always running bad ideas. So what that means is that, to me, we want to make sure that when we get something that's not working, we can quickly pivot, change course, and try out different ideas quickly and easily. And we can do that with an Acquia by a couple of different ways. Primarily, one, would empower both the technical folks by giving them kind of the abilities to create, say, YAML components and use that as a presentation layer to then present something to the non-technical folks. So what we're saying right here is that for developers who want to put together a YAML file for various components, that can be automatically presented in a technical or in a presentation layer that's then utilized to create various kind of layouts and campaigns. So what we're seeing right here is the whole .js or the JavaScript that was presented in the first piece here can then be replicated into a presentation template. So what we're actually seeing right here is a presentation layout for an entire page. At the very top, headers, column layouts, cart access, so on and so forth. That then gets presented in a very visual way to then empower the regular marketers or the business users to create things on the fly. So it's really the marriage of both, say, technical as business together in a one seamless experience. Subsequently, the hybrid approach is all about empowering the developers to leverage APIs to serve out different pieces from a visual tools perspective. Here, what you're seeing is essentially what we call our various components within our CMS, different nodes, content, lists, tokens, and whatnot. This is all defaulted. It's all out of the box. But they actually represent various components that we could then reuse over and over again to really create robust layout pages as well as campaign pages that may not require the use of, say, technical folks or developers to really bring to life. So here's another example here is a very complex 3-column layout that looks at ways of leveraging a container. Ultimately, that gets us into kind of allowing, say, the API calls from the various pieces and components here that will then present into a very fine layout, depending on what I actually want to do. So effectively, this could actually be a cart component based upon, say, user registration and or purchase items. So all in all, this could be done very simply and very easily within the context of an Acquiesce CMS. And with that, we're actually being built on Drupal as our kind of a main core in terms of our CMS itself. And these are some of the innovations that we provided as part of the Drupal core, which is the caching, which is the purging of existing data, the load balancing, the performance, and so forth. All these things are part of what we do within here in Acquia, which is lessen the need for custom code by giving all our end users a more hybrid approach with some of the tool sets that you see right here. Something that's very, very useful in the world of, say, developers. So based on everything we talked about, how does this kind of affect the modern marketing teams? Well, I think of this as kind of 5 distinct users who will benefit in kind of utilizing the whole approach to composability within the confines of Acquiesce CMS. The marketing director, the digital marketers, the analyst, designer, as well as developer in itself. And we carve that out based on various roles and responsibility, how it affects specific roles. For instance, the marketing director. As a person who sets a vision for kind of how this project or campaign actually will flesh out, they're probably more interested in designing, say, different workflows by giving individuals permissions and grouping of individuals together so they can access and do things very quickly and very easily, such as creating new sites, deleting new sites, and controlling the whole governance piece of the campaign in question. The other one might be the digital marketer, who may be much more interested in structured content, meaning that they want to go ahead and create content articles or campaigns pretty much very easily and very quickly. So by utilizing our DXP or our CMS platforms, we can easily empower someone like, say, this digital marketer to really create content on the fly without having access or go to their technical teams to create things that they're thinking about. Thirdly, it might be the marketing analyst, who really are in charge of determining whether that campaign or the marketing initiatives are actually working or not. So things that we can provide here is not just reporting, but giving them the ability to create queries in a SQL to then understand better whether the campaigns and metrics are actually applicable to what they're actually doing here on a day-to-day basis. Our UX designer will love the use of a DXP that's easy to manage from a creative perspective. I mean, their whole focus is to ensure that they're creating content on the fly, whether it's maybe PDFs, pictures, and whatnot. We want to allow them to quickly do that without having to worry, well, who's actually controlling, who has access to the assets? Are they right in terms of brand alignment? So these are things that we can actually help out with in terms of our DXP by leveraging some of the machine learning and tagging suggestions that we have built in to our overall DXP platform. And lastly, our developers, which are providing them with the best framework and tools that are part of our DXP in order to allow them to do things and create things and bring them to life as a result of the business processes set forth by our business and marketing teams. So all in all, that was quite a bit. The whole topic here was about composability, and really the focus was to allow you guys to understand where we as Acquiesce sit and lie and why this is so important. So the thing I'll leave you with here in today's session is that, if you want to know, let's chat, right? Find out about how composability can really help your business. For us, we have a lot of great relationships in the region from a partner standpoint to really help you in the ANZ as well as SEA regions to really understand what could work well, what doesn't work well, and of course, best practices. And of course, if you're very interested, we're happy to provide different product demonstrations, not just out of the box, but more customized versions of you by working with you directly. One thing to know is we're all across Asia Pacific, Australia, and New Zealand. So certainly there's someone there in the region to help you. And then lastly, we're very well versed in things such as, say, our product lines, such as the CMS, emails, omnichannel campaigns, CDP, as well as website infrastructure. So I definitely encourage you, if this is of interest today, to really reach out to us and then work with us directly to kind of find out what works well from a composability standpoint within your business. So I know that's a lot to take in. Hopefully that was helpful. Certainly reach out if you have additional questions. And I guess for now, Nicole, I'll kind of turn it back to you as we kind of wrap up for today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for jumping on today. And we will see you at the next webinar.
Thanks all.